So let's get the Rebreather component in at the start here, just so we can start to build out more of the front, and hopefully in this tutorial as well, we can sort of start to build out more of the side here as well. So I'm just going to turn off the subdiv really quick, and let's just grab this vertex on the inside. I'm just going to go back to global transforms, E to extrude, and I'm just going to push this in along the X into the middle. And we'll go Shift S and cursor to selected, and we just want to keep that there because we will use that as our transform pivot point in just a moment. Let's go ahead, fill in a face here, and then I'm going to go into wireframe view. I'm going to go press I to do an inset here, and you'll notice that it's sort of insetting each individual face on either side of the mirror. So if we press B to do an inset to the boundary, now you'll notice that it's terminating at the non-manifold edges. And I'm just looking at the topmost part of this edge here and just lining it up with our reference. And then this vertex out on the side, just going to bring it in and drop it down a bit. Just probably into around here. So mainly my point of reference is just sort of lining it up with this edge here. And in saying that, I'm just going to drag this out along the X-axis a little bit as well. And then we can just delete that middlemost vertex. That's fine. But just making sure that we keep our 3D cursor there. And so then we can grab these verts, or that edge, and bring them down along the Z-axis. And then I'm just going to bring this in along the X-axis. And then on the side view, we can get an idea of where to position this. I'm also just going to go S, Y, and 0 to just flatten that out along the Y-axis. Bring that out to the front. And then we can go E to extrude again, drag it down along the Z, drag it out along the X. And then to get this next little sort of like bridged section, or like this flat face, what we can do is we can just switch over to our 3D cursor for our transform pivot point, E, and then S to just scale. And we can just scale that out so far that it roughly matches up with the front of our reference image here. We can go E, to extrude again, bring it down along the Z, so just hit it down at this point. I might just bring this out a little bit on the X-axis, so almost trying to make a straight line there. Doesn't matter too much how straight it is. I mean, we can always adjust it later on, but as you'll notice, there is a bevel that runs along all of these, so once we actually do that bevel, you won't really be able to tell just how straight it is, so you can just eyeball it. Doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. And so same thing, we can go E to extrude, scale for this set of flat faces here. And I might just drag this one out just a little bit. I'm just trying to get this vertex to sit roughly in the middle of where that bevel is. That's just my rough guideline for it. It's not perfect by any means, but just so you know what I'm trying to line it up with. And then E, drag down on the Z-axis again. And I'm going to drag this out along the X-axis just a little bit again. Oops, select these, E, scale, bring this down. And this one I'm going to pull in a little bit more. Let's go to there. We'll go E, and we can just bring this down directly on the Z-axis. And yeah, I think I can leave that there. And now you'll notice we're getting this nice sort of like stepped sort of set of faces at the front here. And this sort of juts out a little bit too far. We don't really have a good point of reference for where this should sit. So what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to use the reference really, is I'm just going to pull it back on the Y-axis. And I'm going to go around there. So I'm just trying to make this edge here roughly parallel with the edge in front of it. I think that makes sense. And it's kind of hard to tell in our reference here just because we sort of lose a bit of the pixelation, but I think it's fine to have this sort of sitting above everything else. I mean, if you wanted to, for your design, you could always like go and grab these and sort of tuck it underneath a little bit if you want. But I think for all intents and purposes, this will be absolutely fine. You're really not going to be able to tell much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Cool, and so with that, let's go ahead. I'm just going to drag this out along the X-axis just a little bit more, just so it's sort of sitting more in the crevice of this bottommost edge, and then that's going to let me fill in an edge between these points. And in doing so, I kind of feel like I might need to pull this out along the X-axis a little bit more. And so now this edge is sort of lining up more with that bottommost edge, as well as this one here, so I think the positioning by right should be a little bit better. And then we just need to sort of like push all of these edges back up into the back face here. And it's going to be a little bit wonky looking, and we're going to introduce a big old end-on there, but we will resolve it and fix it up later. It's just going to be easier to leave it as an end-on for the time being, and then we'll come back and address it further down the track. So I'm just going to select this edge, and I'm just going to subdivide it once, just so that we don't start cutting loops back into this portion of the helmet just yet. Just to keep things simple. So I'm just going to go G. I'm just going to try to roughly line this up just into the corner of this edge here, where it sort of, I keep grabbing that just where it meets into the corner there. And so we'll get a better idea. So now I can see where this edge is going. So I might even drag this out just a smidge, sort of push this one in a little bit more. So getting a rough idea of where that is. And then now I can just go Control R along all of these edges to line them up. So I'm just going to place that in the corner and I can connect these together. Go Control R again. So now I've got the middlemost edge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go G, Z, hold down Control to snap it with the vertex that we placed over here. And I might go G, X and snap this over here. Actually, I might just pull it out along the X instead. And then we should be able to fill in a face here. Oops, did I do something wrong there? I did, I forgot to select that. And then we can fill in another face here. And so it's not totally flat, but we can come back to trying to fix up and address some of the positions here because it's not flat because these have all jutted out forward. So what we can do, similar to what we did in the last tutorial where we were adjusting the positions of some of the Visor Brim vertices up there, what we can do is just double tap G, do an edge slide, push it down, then press C to pull it back, and I just want to hide it behind or just in line with this edge here. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect because we will use the Loop Tool's flatten operation in just a moment, but it helps if we sort of create less discrepancy before running that operation, then it won't adjust the positions of our vertices all too drastically. And so you can see now we've kind of lost the positions of these across the front face here. So I'm just going to press G and I'm just going to... I might just go G, Shift and Y so it doesn't bring it forward at all. And then just sort of drag that down there. And I might push it back along the Y axis. There we go. So I'll just do the same here. So just G, Shift, Y, just bring this down to this corner. Actually, what I'll do is I'll go G, Shift, Y, hold down Control. No. G, Z, Control, and then I'll just push this in along the X-axis manually, pull it back along the Y. Sorry, that was a bit more finicky than my practice run. And then just sort of position that down the bottom and drag it back a little bit there as well. Cool, sorry about that, but then now that we've done that and we've sort of got better positions, we've got a flatter set of faces up and along here. Sorry that it sort of became a little bit more finicky than I was intending it to be. So we've got that, and we can just do the same process, so just Control R to cut in more verts here. So I'm just going to try to roughly line these up. I might actually go G, Z, Control, just snap that up to the top so we can fill in a face here. And I'm just going to double tap G, slide this forward a bit. And then we might just need to pull this up a little bit more on the Z axis. Pull it out a little bit as well. And then just double tap G, slide this forward just a smidge. Just around there. And then going to need two more verts in here. So we'll cut this one in. I'm just going to go G, X and snap this one. So it's pretty much sitting directly below this vertex. Drag it down a little bit. And we can fill in this face. Double tap G, bring it forward. C to continue that edge slide back. I think that's in a good spot. And then we just need one more vertex in the back here. So I'm just going to go G, Z, snap this to the top, and then just drag it out along the X-axis a little bit. Might actually drag this in a bit further. And then I might just go G, X, Control to snap that directly above. And so we can fill in a face there, and we can fill in another face there, and then no doubt the position of this is going to be wrong, so just double tap G, slide this forward. And I might just very, very slightly adjust this one, just so it's a little bit more in line. Same as these two verts here, just adjust those. This one too. Not too important, just so that these roughly form a straight line down here. That's what I'm mainly looking for. And then if we go to our side view, we can sort of see if we're getting any skewing on the faces here. So to try and show you what I mean by that, if we look at these three faces from the side view, notice how you can sort of see they sort of like dip in on themselves a little bit. Like we're getting a line where they sort of intersect and cross with one another. So what I'm going to do is for this front one, I'm just going to bring this up along the Z-axis here, just to roughly get them to flatten out. And then do the same here, so just going to drag this up, just to try to get these to flatten out a little bit more. And then I can see that that hasn't worked out too nicely here, so I'm just going to drag this down and sort of just hide it behind its own vertex. Just like so. And then what's going on at the back here? It's a bit of a mishmash of topology. It might be Okay. I'll just G, slide this down. I think that should be all right. So pretty much I was just trying to flatten out these faces the best I could, which I think should be fine. And then we can go ahead, fill in the face here. And don't worry, like if you couldn't follow along exactly with what I just did there, you don't need to exactly with what I've done. The point is we're just trying to get like this nice sort of stepped sort of look here. So that's how it looks on the front view. And then from the side view, they should roughly align in a straight line at the back here. So that's what you're going for. If you couldn't follow along with precisely what I just did, just try to align that. So stepped view and then straight line along the back here. And then once you've done that, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to select this face, and to just ensure that we don't have any strange discrepancies or anything of the sorts, we'll just go ahead, use loop tools and flatten, and you'll notice it hasn't really done too much, but it just makes sure that that's a completely flat face and we don't introduce any strange shading artifacts later on as we cut in additional topology in that area to resolve it. And we can go ahead and crease up all of these hard edges so that we can see the result of our work. It's going to shade really funky at the back here, but if we just ignore that for the time being, we've got something that looks really nice at the front here, and that's the main portion of concern. And this sets us up really quite nicely to get the big sort of portion of the Rebreather component here. I don't actually know what you'd call it, that's just what I've always referred to it as. So let's go ahead, and this really starts to piece it together as well. It starts to create less holes in the mesh, and we can actually start to see more of a Master Chief-esque looking model. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my 3D cursor again as the transform pivot point. If you happen to have moved it at any stage, that's fine. We can just reselect this vertex E, drag it into the middle, Shift S, move our cursor back to selected. And now we've got that repositioned. So don't worry if you ever move anything, we can always put it back to the way we want it. And I'm just going to go S to scale this out and just align it up with the frontmost part there. And then we've got a bit of a bevel going on here. And so I can sort of see that ours is sort of sitting a little bit above where the reference image is sitting, but I think once again that should be fine. I mean, if you really wanted to correct it, I think I did mention this earlier. We could grab all this. I mean, if we move these, we might have to reposition some of this, but let's just bring this down. So I'm just going to get that frontmost vertex to align with our reference image there. And it hasn't really distorted all that too much, which is cool. I'll just grab these. And it's a little bit tough. Might grab all of this. Actually, do I really need to move it? I suppose I could just grab this one here. Just pull it forward a little bit. I don't. I'm probably just being very pedantic at the moment. Now, I'm just going to leave it. It's going to be fine. I need to take my own advice sometimes. Cool, so we'll do that. Sorry, I just get caught up in things that I tell other people to not get caught up on. And I'm just going to bring my bounding box back to here. Drag this out a little bit, and then we can just drag this out to match the front of the reference here. So I think when I actually modeled this, I think I might have done a bevel along here, or maybe I did model it in. But anyway, as I've sort of banged on about so far, having the actual reference images here that are much more readable makes this so much more enjoyable. And then we can just drag this back along the y-axis, line that up at the front, and we just need to taper this in just a little bit into here. So I'm just going to go somewhere around there. I think that should be good. And then we kind of get this weird, this was an absolute nightmare to figure this out when I was modeling it last time, but we need to sort of resolve the front part of the helmet into this Rebreather component. The original references for this I absolutely loathed trying to use because I just couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on. So I'm just going to go ahead, cut in a loop here, just bring this down to the front, and then what that's going to let us do is fill in a face here, so we start to get that intersection point, and then filling in the rest of this, I don't know what the hell's going on, but we'll fill in a triangle here. You can tell I've got a really good way of explaining this section. I've never been able to make heads or tails of what's going on here. So this was kind of my own interpretation of what I think makes the most amount of sense, or it may not make any sense at all. So we'll just subdivide that edge so that we've got a vertex in here. We can fill in a face and then fill in another face. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to go J to connect that. I know that introduces 2 triangles there, but I think in all honesty, it actually does work quite well. And we can just sort of confirm and see that when we crease up these edges around the front here. So I'll also crease these ones here. So Shift D 0.55. And if we just have a look at this. So it's a completely flat face, and technically you're probably getting some shading errors on the inside there, but I mean, like, if this is the viewing distance of the model, you're never going to see that anyway. If for whatever reason you want to do a close-up render that looks like this, first of all, I don't know why you want to do that. Second of all, then you might want to actually go ahead and clean that area up a bit more topology-wise. Your choice. I'm just going to leave it like that because I know it works and I think it should be fine. You might be able to actually, I'm just thinking, could you crease? I suppose creasing that kind of helps a little bit, but I'm just going to leave it as is because I think it just makes the corner a bit too sharp. So yeah, if anybody wants to do that render angle, please show me because I'll be very interested to see how and why you've made it work. Cool, and then once again, I totally hate the entirety of this front section here because everything that's sort of tucked away in that area, we don't really have any good point of reference for. So I'll try and step you through this the best I can to try to make sense of it all. So let's go ahead, let's extrude this vertex at the bottom, and I'm just going to drag it up to meet at this corner at the back here. And let's just drag this back along the y-axis. Actually, it might be a little bit easier with the reference images that I've supplied here. So we'll just drag it back to around that point. And so I might just drag this down just a smidge further, just so it sort of aligns with the reference image just a touch better. And then to get this area in here, honestly, it's a nightmare. I do not like trying to model this area. Hopefully I can teach it well, because personally I struggle with it myself. So what we're going to try to do is, so let's go grab these 2 verts here, grab this edge, and I'm just going to delete that edge there, ignore that, that was from my previous attempt here. So if we use our normal transform here, it's great because if we sort of push this along, you can see that, like, I obviously don't want to do this, this is just an example. You can see that it kind of nicely aligns with the back part of our reference there. So if we go ahead and extrude, you'll notice that it actually changes and modifies that normal, which is really painful. So what we can do to circumvent that is if we just click on our transform orientations with the normal selected, we can just press this little plus icon so we can create a custom orientation. Now as we extrude, it will actually keep that normal orientation. I'm just going to push this back just roughly until, so I can see that, like, this edge is kind of intersecting with our reference image. So if I double tap G and slide this down, I can see that that theoretically should be aligned with the depth in our reference image here. We can't really tell because it gets occluded behind the rest of the model here. But we can take an educated guess. And then I'm just going to press G and just freeform position this. So I'm just going to place this somewhere around here. And this one we've got a little bit of a better point of reference for, because we can actually see that corner from the side here. So I'm just going to press G, and I'm just going to bring it back just until around there, because I can see that that better aligns with the side view there. And I might just double tap G, slide that up a bit so it matches on the front. And more or less, I think that works pretty well. I'm just going to bring my move gizmo back in. And I might even just freeform this one a little bit more, just sort of bring it forward a bit, just into that corner. So I've got something like this. It's just like a bit of a rectangular shape here, and I can see that things aren't totally flat. You can notice we're getting a bit of skewing here, so I'm just going to drag this vertex forward a little bit on the normal x-axis, sorry. So just try to flatten it out, and I still don't know if this is perfectly flat, so what I'm going to do is just go select this face, loop tools, flatten, just to make sure it's perfectly flat so that we're not getting any strange discrepancy. And I still don't think it's perfectly aligned with our reference image, so to speak. Because if I drag that back along the x-axis, then we get that sort of skewing again. Unless I drag this, sorry, double tap G, unless I slide it up along this way, then it should still be flat. Okay, so it's more of like a trapeze shape as opposed to a perfect rectangle. That's cool. And so once we've got that blocked in, and sorry, I know that's a really painful section. This whole area is a nuisance, and I really don't like it. We can extrude this out. I'm just looking at the bottommost vertex here, and so just aligning that bottommost vertex at that corner. And I'm just going to go G, X, Control to just snap that, and then just drag this down along the Z axis. Just get that to align there. And this one we've got better point of reference for. And as you can see, this is, even though that looks nice on the front, it is an absolute mess on the side here. So I'm just going to grab both of these, SY0, and push this forward along the Y axis. So I've just got that topmost vertex aligned, and then we can just pull this one back. Just get that aligned in and around there. And I still kind of feel like this is the wrong spot, because notice how, like, you'd expect this edge to line up properly with our reference material here. So I'll just drag this back along the Y, because now I know that at least it aligns along the side, and it kind of does line along the front. So I might just double tap G, slide this down, and then slide it up. So I think that's better aligned now, and I think we've got better point of reference given the fact that we can try to align this edge along the front and the side. So I'd hazard a guess to the fact that this is in the proper position. So hopefully that helps, because I totally understand this area is a pain. So hopefully that helps you line that up better. And then we can extrude this edge, just bring it into the center. And now we should be getting a better idea of the level of depth that we're trying to create here. Because unfortunately the reference image isn't really going to come into that much use within this area, because most of it is totally occluded by the rest of the helmet. So we're going to have to rely more on the actual model itself to tell us where things should be positioned. So what I'm going to do here with this vertex, I'm just going to extrude, push it in, and fill in a face, just so that we can start to fill in more of the helmet, so that we can use our own topology as a point of reference for the rest of the model here. Because this is going to get a little bit tricky, but I'll try to step you through it best I can to make it make sense. And so, sort of see the fact that we need an edge connecting this internal face here, so we need something like this going on. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this vertex and just E to extrude and pull this back into the corner that I can see for this triangle. And then if we fill in a face, we'll probably get something that's disgustingly distorted. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this back along the Y-axis, just like so. And I'm just trying to look at it from an angle where I can kind of see it forming a flat face. So at the moment, I think it's skewing a little bit. So I'm going to push it forward just a little bit more. I'm just trying to get like a really harsh grazing angle on it. So I'm just going to pull it forward a little bit more on the Y. And then I'm just going to test. I'm just going to flatten it out. So notice how when I flattened it, it's made a very negligible amount of difference. So that to me indicates the fact that the positioning is pretty good. And I'll just have the flatten on there so that I'm assured of the fact that it's a perfectly flat face. And yeah, so it's probably not perfect, but hopefully that helps you understand how I've tried to position that in 3D space without accurate reference. And then to get this part here, once again, it's going to be a little bit tough. So let's select this vertex and let's just extrude it down into this sort of little corner that we can see here. And let's use a very, very similar philosophy. So I'm just going to connect an edge between these points. I'm not too worried about the fact that it doesn't properly line up at the moment. That's fine. And in doing so, let's actually just fill in... Yeah, let's fill in a big end-on face here. Because we know that this is going to have to resolve into like a perfectly flat face, right? And so same thing, I'm just going to try to pull this back along the Y-axis. And just pick some grazing angles here. Some harsh angles, I don't know if grazing angle is the right term. I think this needs to come back. Or does it need to go forward a bit more? It's going to go around there. I think that looks flat. I think if I run the flatten operation, it's going to adjust things quite significantly, which, yeah, it has. Actually, sorry, something I've just realized and why this is causing a little bit more of a headache than it needs to. We're not really aligning this quite properly at the moment. So if we just select this vertex and press V to rip it, we can keep this vertex at this location. I'm just going to grab this one. I'm just going to pull this back a little bit more. Because you can probably notice the fact that where it was sitting here, and we're sort of getting like some skewing along the face. It's not like perfectly flat or anything, and you can sort of see like how it's getting triangulated internally. So if we just pull this back a little bit more to around here, what I think you'll find is that we'll get a better idea of where to place the rest of the topology, which is going to be very handy for us. So I'm just going to pull it back to around there because I think this is a nice flat face now. And once again, just as a means of checking, we can always try to do the flatten operation. So it's probably adjusted things a little bit more than I want. I'm not going to do the flatten operation because I think the position that I've got here works quite nicely. And we can start to fill in. We can see a face forming here. And we can actually, instead of having this triangle face here, I think we can pretty easily get away with having a quad there instead. So hopefully that will make some of you happy that we're not having two triangles in that area. And let's just start to crease things up because we'll just check on the subdiv so we can see what's happening in this area. Because I know that this is a bit tricky and it's a bit complicated, and I'm sorry about that. I'm doing the best I can to explain how we resolve all this. Double tap J, slide. I just want to bring this back. Okay, maybe if we just make this perfectly flat with itself, that might work. And then what I'm thinking is that this edge, or this face here, doesn't need to be equal in length. So I think, what if we just use this vertex here, cut this edge down. I'm just going to cut it more down to here so that it's more in line with that there. And I'm just going to slide this vertex down just so that we can do an edge slide and then C to pull this forward. I think that starts to line up our reference images just a little bit better. And then I think that is in the correct position. All right, so it sort of distorts a little bit, but what we might be able to do is double tap G, slide this back, and then C to slide it in. Actually, no. Let's just leave that there. Okay, so I know this sort of skews out and what have you, but I think this should work. And then I just want to test. Let's go ahead and run a flatten operation. I just want to see how much it changes the model. Well, it changes it a decent amount. So I'm just going to leave it the way I've got it. And we can make some adjustments in a moment. But I'm more interested in trying to keep this area in here flat, because we are going to cut those circular pieces in later on. So we want to keep this face flat as well as this one here. So that's what I'm more interested in. This can always be adjusted later on. I'm not too concerned with it. So let's actually start to try to fill that in. So let's go Control R along the front here. And so let's fill in an edge there because this area is probably going to get a little bit more complicated. And hopefully this starts to help us influence a little bit more of the design that's occurring. And then so we can get the remainder of that face by filling this in. I think that's starting to work. Okay, that's looking good. Sorry, I know this part is tricky. You can see probably even I'm struggling a little bit with it here as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of confidence to know I don't actually get everything right and I don't know how to approach everything on my first try. It's very much trial and error when I model as well. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is that pretty much all of these faces look flat, which is great, but I think this vertex position is completely incorrect because you notice how we're sort of getting all that skewing up at that point. So what I'm going to do is, because I can kind of see how much it's skewing from, I suppose, this angle here. So I'm just going to double tap G, slide it back, and then press C to extend that. I think that's roughly making it flat. So now that I've got that, what I'm interested in is definitely doing a flatten operation here. So I just want to see how much this all moves. So I'm going to select all these faces and we'll go Loop Tools and Flatten. And so it does do a decent bit of an adjustment up there. It sort of says to me that I might need to change things, but maybe instead of doing a flatten operation, I wonder, what if we instead do G stretches? G stretch to flatten that out. And then if we do another G stretch across this way, I don't know if that sort of just made it fight with itself. And then can we do a G stretch between these positions, or will that sort of just distort the positioning? It distorts the positioning a bit. Okay, so I'm not going to do it there. Let's just crease up all of these edges. So just these ones around here. Shift E 0.55. And this will just start to give me a bit of a better idea as to how this is shading. Okay, so I think this area in here is completely flat. And so that came about because I did G-stretch there, another one there, and then across here. And that sort of seemed to have flattened the area out. I wonder, I just want to see if we were to flatten it. Okay, so it still adjusts the positions a bit. I think I'll do the flatten now, because after doing the G-stretches, I'm a little bit more confident that the positions aren't being distorted too heavily. So I think that's good. Hopefully that's made sense. I hope I've been able to explain that decently enough for what I've done. It is a tricky area, I'll tell you that much. Back when I first did this in 2022, I struggled with it. I'm clearly struggling with it again, even after my practice run. So if you got any questions about it, just ask me in the comments, please, and I will try to step you through it. And so let's do an inset here for this triangle. And then I'm just going to get rid of this edge normal that we created, use our normal orientation, and I'm just going to pull this forward. And once again, this doesn't look like it's going to line up all too nicely for us. So we'll just pull it out forward a little bit, and we might be able to use this side view to help us position things better. So I'm just going to pull this up and out to just sort of meet at that peak there. And then pull this one up and out to meet there. And I'll pull this out just to meet with that edge there. And then let's just have a look from the front view. So I'll just pull this along on the x-axis. And same with that one there. I might just pull that out and up. And I think that should be all good. And then let's just go ahead and crease all of these edges up. So Shift 8.55 to crease that. And cool. All right, so it's a little bit muddy in this area, but that's all right for the time being because we will come back and clean this up later. Just wanted to get that out of the way because, as you can see, I find that tricky. It's not a particularly fun area, I don't find. But I think we've done a pretty good job there. If you need to tear it all apart and do it again, feel free to do as such because I certainly never get it perfect on my first try. This is not my first recording of this section either, so don't worry if it's not panning out nicely for you. But I think we'll call it there because that is a pretty intensive area to try to fix up. But as I've said, if you got any questions about it, please just reach out, let me know. Discord is definitely probably the better place to get help and assistance with that because you can always send me your model and I can review it and sort of make adjustments for you and send it back. But yeah, just let me know how we go and I'll do my best to help you through it. And yeah, we'll continue building out more and more of this as we go. But hopefully you're happy with the way it's looking at the moment. We're really starting to get a little bit more profile and personality into everything. And don't worry, these edges won't remain so sharp here. We will do a bevel on them later on and we'll make it all nice and smooth and clean it all up.